Welcome to What Is It Feminist, the podcast that supports women's rights and women's wrongs. I am your host, Amanda Hernandez, sociologist by training, hater by nature. If I play my cards right, if I have planned correctly and finished all the items on my to-do list as past Amanda instructed, this episode will be coming out the Friday before Super Bowl 60, LX. I had to Google the Roman numerals. I don't know about that. But don't worry, listener, we are not talking about football. But I did plan for this episode to come out pre-Super Bowl because today we are talking about Benito, Bad Bunny, who will be this year's headliner for the Super Bowl halftime show. Admittedly, I am not as familiar with Bad Bunny's music as many people are, but I do know the hits, of course, and I don't live totally under a rock. And also because I don't live under a rock and I love celebrity gossip, I know the broad strokes of Benito's goings-ons, including every time he is on SNL. I did binge his discography in preparation for recording, and I watched his April 2025 Tiny Desk concert and was absolutely charmed at the way he blushed when he was like, I didn't realize so many people would be here, as if anyone on staff was going to skip it. Another thing that is interesting about doing an episode on Bad Bunny is that this is the first, and I think only installment of this show that is primarily focused on a man, not just critiquing men or patriarchy, but looking at Bad Bunny himself, how he's living, how he's an embodied site of resistance against traditional gender expression, racism, colonialism, and imperialism. Now, our guest today is also another interesting point because usually when I'm putting together an episode, I have an idea of the thing I want to talk about first. Then I identify who I would like to be my guest. Previous guests, please take no offense. I would have found something for us to talk about, but for today's guest, I knew that no matter what she wanted to talk about, I wanted to listen. And she told me she needed a platform to talk about Bad Bunny. And I said, yes, ma'am. This very special guest is Dr. Sonia Valencia. Now, before I give you her credentials, as I always do, because my friends always deserve their roses, their accolades, their credentials amplified, I want you to know that not only has Sonia been a wonderful friend to me for nearly a decade, but I also want you to know that she was my instructor for my Intro to Women's and Gender Studies in undergrad, my very first semester at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Sonia totally changed my world, helped give me language about feminism, showed me that feminism has a lot of hope and affirmation to offer the world. And she got me a karaoke room at my bachelorette party. And even though she couldn't make it because she got very sick, it was very brave and selfless of her to let us continue to party without her. So now for her official mini bio. Dr. Valencia is currently the programs director for TRIO Scholars Programming at the University of California, Irvine. She has an MA in English from Georgetown University and a PhD in English from the University of Texas at San Antonio. Her research focuses on representations and treatments of environmental catastrophes in Latinx cultural production. Sonia, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. I am so excited to be here. It's such an honor. I have to admit that when the first season of your podcast came out, I prayed that I would be invited to be a guest on your show. And I was too shy to ask you if you could invite me to come on the podcast. So when you reached out, I was like, oh my goodness, my prayers have been answered. So such a joy to be here. And secondly, when you reached out to me about coming on the show, I had just come back from seeing Bad Bunny in Mexico, and I was just like overflowing with thoughts that I wouldn't shut up about and wanted to talk to anybody and everybody about. So thank you so much for giving me a platform and an opportunity to talk about Benito. The only other thing, I think your bio sort of gives folks a background into who I am or a sneak peek into who I am. The only thing that I would add that is going to probably come up a lot today is that I am a feminist, specifically a Chicana feminist. And that's really important because it's a type of feminism that is really okay with ambiguity and contradiction. It's not very rigid. And so I know inevitably there are going to be critiques about whether Bad Bunny is feminist or not feminist, but as a Chicana feminist, I'm okay with the contradiction. So I wanted to frame today's conversation by noting that first and foremost. And then I also want to add, and then you can take this out if you don't want to keep it, that having you in class was so fun. I liken having you in class to like maybe me being like a basketball coach and having, I don't know anything about basketball, having like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James like on my team, because I had like both you and Itzel, another brilliant Chicana feminist, like in the same class. And I just knew you guys were like had a bright future within this field. And I don't even know if this is legal for me to say or not, but when I would grade papers, I would use like yours and Itzel's and other like really smart people in the class as sort of like palate cleansers. And I wouldn't allow myself to read your essays until I had read like, 10. And I was like, okay, my treat is going to be reading like Amanda's essay because I knew it was always going to be on point. And you're so funny, and it's incredibly challenging to be funny and witty like in writing. You can do that in person, or this medium lends itself to that, but in writing, it's hard to be funny. And like, you crack me up. Like, your essays made me laugh. So I just wanted to share that tidbit. You can choose to keep it or not if you don't want to, but yeah.
I'm going to keep it because I want the people to know, obviously, but also I'm horrified that that's my impulse. I'm like, no, they have to know how funny I was. They have to know how good I was. Well, thank you so much for the compliments. And I'm so excited that you're here to educate us on Benito today. First, I'm wondering if you can give the uninformed among us like a quick and dirty intro, set the stage. Who is Bad Bunny? How he's risen to be the top global artist.
Yes, of course. So first and foremost, I would not call myself like a Bad Bunny expert by any means. There are people doing really cool things, teaching courses on Bad Bunny. I'd love to take one. And so this is sort of what I've gathered just doing some searching about who he is, right? So Bad Bunny, as Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, was born in Puerto Rico. He was born in 1994, and he grew up in a working class family. He talks about that a lot in his music. He initially started releasing music online. I don't even know if this is still active, but on something called SoundCloud. And it was a place where people can just upload their music. It was a way of sort of disrupting this mega music industry. And he started to gain some traction there. And that really is sort of how he came into this industry. He gained a lot of attention. And I think the SoundCloud piece is really important because it gives us a perspective. He's not coming in terms of like being discovered or being like recruited right into the music industry. He's entering like through the back door. And I think that that's really important when we think about his politics and who he is and why we can trace some of the elements that we're going to talk about to really even the start of his music career. It's not something that he's doing because it's in vogue or because he wants to cash in a particular political moment. And so, as you mentioned, he has been named as Spotify's like top global artist multiple times, including last year. And the other thing that I would add is part of the recognition of his name is not only about his music, which he belongs to the reggaeton genre that has origins in the Caribbean, Black working class origins in the Caribbean. In preparing for today, I learned that reggaeton was like literally criminalized in Puerto Rico, that in the late 80s and 90s, people were raiding places that sold reggaeton mixtapes and were like collecting them as contraband. So literally, like, a reggaeton
Yeah.
is the enemy of the state. Uh, and so he is, we can place him within the reggaeton genre. He's also part of what we would call the Latin trap genre. But one of the things that's really interesting and that draws me to Bad Bunny's music is that, again, he refuses to be boxed in. He refuses fixed categories, and he does a lot of genre blending in his music. His most recent album, Debí tirar más fotos, has been described by many as a love letter to Puerto Rico, and he brings in a lot of historical music that is native to Puerto Rico, including plena, bamba. We generally associate salsa, merengue with the islands, and so he's mixing all of that with like rap, hip hop, dance hall, reggaeton. So that's Bad Bunny in a nutshell. The other thing that I want to disclose is that I was not a day one fan of Benito. I was not listening to him when he was on SoundCloud. I came to Bad Bunny a little bit later. I really was introduced to him through the album Un Verano Sin Ti in 2022. My sister recommended that I listen to Bad Bunny. I was in the middle of a horrible breakup. And, you know, I'm a Mexican American. So Mexican Spanish is very different than Puerto Rican Spanish. And believe it or not, at first, the way that he sang in his Puerto Rican Spanish felt like a barrier to entry because he uses a lot of slang, Puerto Rican slang. I'm like, pause, let me look up what this means so I can fully understand the context of the music. Or even like some of his Spanish, I couldn't fully understand. So it took me work to get into Bad Bunny. But why did I do that work? Because I heard a song called Andrea, and that is probably my favorite feminist Bad Bunny song. Like, if somebody asked me, what's your favorite feminist Bad Bunny song? It would be Andrea. And so I was like, wait, who is this guy? Of course, I had heard of Bad Bunny before. There were tweets, things on social media. A lot of friends thought that I might find it interesting that he wore skirts or that he used nail polish, or when he was on the Jimmy Fallon performance, both wearing a skirt and wearing a t-shirt that said "Mataron a Alexa, no un hombre en una falda," which translates to "They killed Alexa, not a man in a skirt." A very powerful statement against the transphobia of the Puerto Rican state, who described when they in their reports of the murder as described her as un hombre en una falda. So I had friends who like thought that I might be interested in Bad Bunny, and though I tuned into those moments and was like, okay, cool, I was also skeptical. And so that's why I'm really excited to be here today. I was like, like, is he just doing this because it's in vogue or what's going on? And now I know there really is a long history. And that was a really long intro to to who Bad Bunny is and how I came to know Bad Bunny and fall in love with his music.
Not too long, absolutely perfect. I think it sets the stage really well for a lot of things that I think we're probably going to hit on. Um, so when we had our brainstorm call, we talked about a lot of different ideas, like different directions we could potentially take this conversation. And one of the things I remember writing down that really stuck with me was the idea of language. So Latin pop sort of emerges into the US pop culture scene in the late 1990s, even maybe a little bit before that with like Menudo or something. And then in the early 2000s, it really sort of blasts. I don't know. That's a weird word to use. Blasts off. Erupts. There we go. I like erupts. It erupts. But a lot of these artists, they had if they wanted to cross over into more mainstream US markets or popularity, they had to speak or sing in English in order to have a successful crossover. So we have artists like Selena, Ricky Martin, Mark Anthony, Shakira, who all start their careers primarily singing in Spanish and then blow up once they start singing in English. The Latin explosion, I remember watching VH1 and they would be like Latin explosion hour and have all
Yeah.
the music videos from these artists. So you also have artists who have Latine ancestry or heritage who sometimes sing in Spanish but don't. So people like J-Lo or Christina Aguilera who are also kind of like lumped in with this genre. Enter Bad Bunny. And the phrase that you used when we had our conversation was the politics of translation. And you already sort of started hinting at this. And so I would love for you to tease this out a bit for us. What is Bad Bunny's politics of translation and how does it fit into the broader pop culture stage?
It's important to know and go back to the beginning where I said that I think the fact that he started his career on SoundCloud is part of what has allowed him to do this, right? When he was uploading his music on SoundCloud, it was in Spanish. And so he gained popularity outside of Puerto Rico, even though his music was in Spanish. So, what does that tell Bad Bunny? There is a hunger for what I'm offering and I don't necessarily need to change who I am in order to be successful. That's on one level, right? I would also argue that translation isn't neutral, that translation is political. And when you think about the history of Latinos in relation to the US or in the US, Latinos have been legally pressured to not speak Spanish. When we think about what's going on in this particular moment, we have a move in the United States to all of a sudden adopt English as our official language. In this moment, it is even more important that Bad Bunny says, no, I will not sing in English. And if you want to engage my music, you can feel it. And that's one of the also interesting things about the genre is that reggaeton is very embodied. It is, you know, the lyrics matter, but reggaeton is very much about like eliciting something in the body. I don't think we can think about reggaeton without thinking about perreo, right? Without thinking about dancing. And so that's how sometimes Bad Bunny has some really hilarious lines where, you know, the focus is more on the beat, on the music, I would say, as opposed to necessarily exactly what he's saying. But back to translation. So translation isn't neutral. Translation is about appeasing and being palatable to a primarily English speaking market. And he says no. And that is also an extension of his politics as a Puerto Rican. Puerto Rico has a very complicated relationship to the United States. I hate when people say, oh, Bad Bunny isn't performing in the United States. No, Bad Bunny performed in Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States. You mean he's not on the mainland? So him refusing to translate his music into English is also very much an extension of political sovereignty for Puerto Rican people. Of like, we are a separate people with a unique culture, with a unique history, with a unique language that really doesn't fit the schema of the US history, culture, and language. But, you know, you want to annex us, you want to continue to claim that we're part of you as a commonwealth. And this isn't me like over politicizing Bad Bunny. He very much speaks about the trials and tribulations of Puerto Rico, what it looks like at the micro level every day to be part of a place that is essentially a modern day colony of the United States. And just the way that this has really impacted the economy, the infrastructure. There again, back to the in-between, they're in this in-between state. So when I think of Bad Bunny refusing, that's also an extension of his politics as a Puerto Rican who's like, I'm not just gonna roll over for the United States. And the most recent example of this is, like I said, his refusal to come and perform on the mainland. He doesn't have any shows in the 50 United States. And a lot of people were very critical about that. Say things like, Puerto Rico's part of the United States. Like, how are you not gonna have a show in the United States? But he said why. I'm not gonna go, again, refusal, right? I'm not gonna go perform in a city where I know that ICE is gonna target the audience and be waiting for them before or after. I'm not going to serve up my people on a platter for you. And I think that extends to his music as well. Now, this is very controversial, not only by English speakers who feel uncomfortable or sort of resent having to do the work of translating or looking up what his lyrics say, but it's also controversial with other Latina, Latinx, Latin American artists. Most recently, Rosalia made a comment in an interview and said something along the lines of, well, I produce music in English out of respect for my fans. I was pissed because she said, like, out of respect and love. I'm paraphrasing, for my fans. And I was pissed because I'm like, actually, it's Bad Bunny's love of his fans. And it is Puerto Ricans, it is Latinos that have pushed Bad Bunny to the top. It's love and respect for them that he's showing a different way. And that operates on the level of language, and it operates at the level of movement, right? So at the level of language, it's this, I refuse to translate or sing in English. And then at the level of movement, one of my favorite songs in the new album, No Me Saquen Aquí, like, I will not be moved from here. And so again, in his music and the way he carries himself and the decisions that he makes, Bad Bunny just refuses to be easily consumed, or easily put into a box, and specifically rejects making things palatable or easy for people in positions of power, and by that I mean like English speakers. Like, most of our society, cultural production, politics caters to English. When we think about this within the context of feminism, and I want to bring it back specifically to Chicana feminism, this was a big debate in the 80s and early 90s with Chicanas, specifically, again, Mexican American thinkers and activists reclaiming their identity and documenting, specifically Tejanas, right? Documenting the fact that I had to lose my language. I was forced to lose my tongue. Gloria Anzaldúa, a very famous Chicana feminist, talks a lot about the tongue, both as an analytic, as a metaphor. But, I was forced to lose my tongue because in order for us to survive in Texas, parents chose not to teach us Spanish. We don't want to create a reason to become targets. And so it was assimilation or death. And I'm not being hyperbolic. We have a history of the Texas Rangers lynching Mexican Americans in Texas. And so parents, family members, grandparents made the hard decision to not teach their kids Spanish. And so then you have a generation who's growing up not having that language, but being tied to the culture, and they have these conflicting and painful experiences. And as they try to reclaim the language, as they try to write and think in that language, Chicana feminists had to make a decision. In my writings, will I italicize? Will I translate? And a lot of them said, no, I will not. Some of them did italicize, but they did not translate. And so when I think of like how I situate Benito within an arc of Latinx, Latina, Chicana feminism, this is part and parcel of that Latina politics around translation. It's rooted in this decision not to translate.
It's so interesting that oftentimes arguments for like you need to speak or perform in English so you can have success. Like he didn't need to do that to be successful, and not that it's saying all of his political commitments would be for nothing if he wasn't also making a lot of money. Like, and not to say that, but like he didn't need to sing in English to cross over or be mainstream.
Yeah, I think it points to we talk, the title of the show, and I know inevitably we're going to get to, is he feminist? And I was thinking, I like to think more about like feminist world making, and this move of his is part of that feminist world making, or a world making that differs from the world that we currently live in. And by that I mean a world where historically Latina Spanish speaking artists have, like you said, essentially been told, like, if you want to have any success with an English speaking market, then you're going to have to sing in English. Bad Bunny is showing us another world is possible, and that's fucking beautiful.
I just got chills.
I'm hoping I don't cry. Like, as I was writing some of these notes, I get teary-eyed thinking about like the power of what he's doing. And again, over and over, like I think about that in this particular moment, it just like is even more powerful.
Totally. I was reading an article to prepare for our conversation today, but I'm also teaching it in a class that I'm doing this semester on pop culture. The article is called Bad Bunny and the Extraordinary Rise of Latin Music by Andrea Garcia Bourbon. And in that piece, she refers to the music industry as part of a racial project. And by racial project, academics mean a place or a thing or ideas that we have to help us make sense of not only racial identity, but racial hierarchies. And she says that because music and the music industry is part of a racial project, how do we make sense of race? Bad Bunnies and different artists can use their platforms to disrupt ideas about racial hierarchy. So you've already sort of gotten at some of this, especially around ideas of colonialism and imperialism. So tell us a little bit about how Bad Bunny is not only disruptive in terms of like ongoing US imperialism, but also around ideas of racial identity and racial hierarchy.
Oh, okay. That one's that one's a little complicated. And one of the things that I'm thinking about for Latinos, whenever we're thinking about race, it's complex because Latinos come in all colors, right? They can be fair with blonde hair and green eyes, or they can be Black. And we come in all, those are just two ends of the spectrum, and we come in all ends of the spectrum. And so, there are a lot of conversations around Bad Bunny's success and, his own light skinnedness, his curly hair, and where that fits into that. So in terms of thinking about like a racial project, I want to note that to a certain extent, Bad Bunny's own presentation as a light-skinned Latino, I don't necessarily know that he is pushing the envelope on that front, through who he is, right? But in his music videos, I should say, and in his concerts, he showcases exactly what I just said, which is that Latinos come in all colors. And he does this really beautiful thing of also being intentional about introducing people of different ages. You have people who are middle aged, people who are elderly, people who are thin, people who are fat, and that itself is like pushing boundaries. And so on one level, I think that is how Bad Bunny's music or music production is challenging ideas of race. There are other layers that I think that we can add. One of them having to do with the genre itself, the genre of reggaeton, and sort of operating within that genre. I think that it would be fair to say or describe reggaeton sort of as an anchor for Bad Bunny. I mentioned earlier that he genre blends a lot, but he always comes back to reggaeton. What does that mean? If we say that reggaeton, it has its roots in Black, Caribbean, working class communities, he continues to anchor in his musical production in that history. I think that that's another way of really challenging race or the way that we think of racial constructions. He also gives flowers to, and he historicizes a lot and gives a lot of credit to his predecessors. And so that includes talking about key Black reggaetoneros from who he has learned and who have really shaped his music, o salseros, merengue, again, plena. He talks a lot in his music about the Taino experience in Puerto Rico, and that is the indigenous experience in Puerto Rico. So literally his music is educating people who might not know this. And I'm not just thinking like non-Puerto Ricans. There are Puerto Ricans who are maybe not exposed to that history for the reasons that we've already talked about, right? And in that way, I do think that he's disrupting racial hierarchies. The other aspect that we need to think about is the way that he's disrupting coloniality. And so I'm going to get a little technical for a second because I want to give credit, right, to the amazing feminists who have been doing this work. And this work operates outside of academia as well. When I think about gender, race, sexuality, and coloniality, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the work of Maria Lugones, rest in peace, Queen. And basically she said, listen, like coloniality wasn't just about an economic and political structure. There was also, or race, it was also including a gender product because a gender project, because within these moments of colonial context, not everybody was recognized as being a man or a woman, right? Some bodies were not recognized that way. They didn't have the privileges of being a man, particularly men of color. They weren't recognized as men. Women of color were not recognized or given the protections that women were given. We were likened more to animals and treated as such, and so didn't have any kind of political protection. I think it's important to note that they're not separate conversations. So I want to talk also about Bad Bunny disrupting coloniality, and really all of the songs and even his most recent residency in Puerto Rico are exactly that, him talking about or speaking up against, bringing attention to the continued colonial relations that Puerto Rico has with the United States. One of in one of his songs, he likens what's happening in Puerto Rico to what happened in Hawaii, and that song is haunting and it's so beautiful. And he says, "No quiero que le pase a Puerto Rico lo que le pasó a Hawaii." Right? I don't want what happened to Hawaii to happen to Puerto Rico. And so he's talking about gentrification. He's talking about the beaches, about privatizing the beach, about kicking people out of their homes to make this a 100% sort of like resort economy that depends on people who are not from Puerto Rico coming in and visiting and taking resources and leaving nothing for the people who are there. He sings about Hurricane Maria. His song El Apagón, amazing song. And it really is talking about the political and economic response to that, the failure, the lack of response to that environmental catastrophe. And so in those ways, Bad Bunny is very much speaking to a colonial regime, to colonial power from the position of an islander. What does this all boil down to? I'm gonna, in this moment, call myself like a diasporic Latina feminist. And by that, I mean, I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in Mexico. My parents didn't move to the United States because they wanted to. They moved to the United States because they had to. They didn't feel like there were any other opportunities. And this is after the United States has exploited its neighbor Mexico for many years. So when I speak to friends, to other like diasporic Latinos, there's so much pride in what Bad Bunny is doing in the song when No Me Saquen Aquí, when he says, Pe fucking R. Like, I feel that pride. I'm like, yes, yo soy de Pe fucking R. Wait, no, I'm from Mexico. But like, I share your sentiment, Bad Bunny, in the sense that like, I refuse to be separated from my culture. I refuse to be pulled away from my home. And I think that other diasporic peoples, other feminists also really are moved by that part of Bad Bunny's work. And so his work is just so political.
Reminds me of, I think it was a reel you sent me on Instagram. It was like I think a promo shot or a promo video for the Super Bowl performance. And like all you said was not Bad Bunny doing more to heal this nation than the administration or something like that.
Yes. I want to give a shout out to this framing to my friend Wendy. She and I went to the concert in Mexico. Wendy's a therapist, and she's the one who really helped me think of Bad Bunny and sort of the healing work that he's doing. So I really want to give her credit for that. And ever since she said that, I'm like looking at these acts and these moves, these decisions through a different lens. And even that promo video, y'all should go watch it.
Another place that Bad Bunny is disruptive is around performances of gender, ideas about what it means to be masculine. This has been both in terms of exactly the sort of stuff you've been talking about, like his dress, his music. I know there's been speculation. I tried to Google this. I could not get to the bottom of it. Whether or not he's had like cosmetic procedures done. In what other ways do you find him playing with ideas of masculinity, gender, pushing back on that?
Yeah. I want to like dive in there a little bit more, and then I'll answer the question. So in music videos, so notably Yo Perreo Sola, which there's a lot of like, there's controversy surrounding that video. So essentially, Bad Bunny dresses up as a woman. He puts on drag. The song takes on the perspective of an empowered woman who basically says like, I don't need your attention. I don't need your time. I don't need your money. I can do it by myself. I can dance by myself. And so at the end of the music video, so while the perspective or the point of view of the song and the video are from the perspective of a woman, at the end of the video, there's some text. And that is very much directly addressed to men. I have in my notes somewhere what the text is, so give me a second. Like, why did I have 3 pages?
Your nails are so pretty.
Thank you. At the end of the video, he has a message and it says, if she doesn't want to dance with you, respect her. She twerks alone. This is I've translated it into English. And so I think that moment is so powerful because that message is not to other women. That message is to men. So he's calling in men into the conversation and essentially saying, it's not enough, because women have been doing this, right? We've been doing things by ourselves and for ourselves and trying to dance by ourselves until someone comes up to you behind you and tries to dance with you. And in this way, he's calling in men and saying, like, the responsibility is also on you, right? And saying, respect women. Like, if they don't want to dance with you, walk away. She can dance by herself. I think that that's so important, because one of the things that, Gloria Anzaldúa, and I had an issue with this when I was young. Gloria Anzaldúa was like, we need men in like our feminist project. And I was like, Anzaldúa, do we really? Like, do we really need them? And I was angry, okay? And she's like, we not only need our gay brothers, but we need like heterosexual men. I was like, I don't buy this.
I think you're wrong, Gloria.
Yeah. 19-year-old me was like, let me correct Gloria Anzaldúa, because she like clearly doesn't understand what we need. And I've grown since then. And we do need men. We need men to speak to other men. We need men to hold each other accountable, because we have been saying these messages forever. But the truth is that we also do need men to be part of this project. And that is very much that disruption of gender norms, by him saying, like, speaking up and making it okay to call out on your brothers, to call out other men and say, hey, like, cut it out. That's not cool. I think that we would be in a much better place if men did that more often. If when people said, try to couch something as a joke, because people love to say that it was just a joke. Feminists can't take a joke. It's like, I was just kidding.
Funny.
Yes. When we say it's not funny, what happens? Oh, feminists lack humor. Feminists are killjoys. Feminists can't laugh. Feminists can't take a joke. But the power of having another man say, that's not funny. That's inappropriate. Are you really saying X? That's powerful. And so he does that in the music video, right? So the music video is saying that, but in case there were any doubts, he ends with the text. And he's like, no, in case you were distracted by me donning these fake boobs, and he can really throw it back. I was like, okay, Bad Bunny, you would make a really cute woman. I like that for you. He's like, in case you're distracted by that, let me be clear, fellow men, like, leave her alone, respect her. And he literally takes opportunities to call out and speak to people in power, whether that be an important figure in reggaeton, whether that be to the nation state, or whether that be to this collective male community, right? Whoever might be watching his videos. And so in those ways, he is disrupting ideas of masculinity and imagining other ways of being a man, right? And so that's on one level. And then we have like how he adorns himself, like how he dresses, choosing to go to the Met Gala, like wearing a skirt. Again, he dressed in drag, had a full wig, like had, the boobs, like. And I love that Bad Bunny does this. And, it never, the people who are most pressed about it are other men. Not usually, I don't want to say no women, but not most women. But the point here that I want to make is, listen, that didn't take away from Calvin Klein calling him up and saying, hey, Bad Bunny, get in your chonies and, let us show the world. Show the world like an outline of your package from different angles, of your phallus, the symbol of masculinity. The point is, like, him doing these things, he shows you, like, it doesn't challenge, doesn't really call into question like his sexual orientation. People can make comments about it, but Bad Bunny is still dating hot women and being asked to be the figure for this campaign. He's still being invited to other very hyper masculine spaces, WWE, wrestling. He did a little stint there. And so what does that tell me about like sort of his version of masculinity? It's fluid, and I love that. It's flexible. It's opening up to other expressions that have usually been not silenced, but that have been, what's the word, Amanda, that people are like, don't do it, that
Police.
thank you, that people have policed. And it's something as basic as like wearing nail polish. It is something as basic as like wearing a skirt, or even like pink. Someone decided that pink is for girls. And I want to say that the music video is Caro, and it has like Pink Panther themes, but he has a pink room, and I'm like, oh my God, Bad Bunny, yes, like goals. I wish I had that room. But this is a moment that we have to talk about an interview with the Los Angeles Times. So they ask him, like, Bad Bunny, the world wants to know, like, are you a heterosexual? And I love his response. And he says, you know what? In this particular time and place, I'm attracted to women. I date women. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe I'll like men in the future. He's presenting gender and sexuality as something that's living, as something that can change over time. It doesn't have to be static. And I think that that's so powerful. And then I have to talk about this other moment where I think he's playing with gender and our understanding of masculinity and Latino masculinity in particular. When you and I had our discovery brainstorming call, I couldn't shut up about the fact that that Bad Bunny had just concluded his Mexico tour with Making Up on Stage with J Balvin, another Latin reggaeton trap artist who he has a music video with. Honestly, I didn't even know they were beefing. Okay. And again, I say that to disclose, like, I don't know all things Bad Bunny. Like, I don't follow him like that. So when I saw that moment, I was like, oh girl, I didn't know they were fighting. But that's not the focus. The focus is this beautiful moment on stage that Bad Bunny and J Balvin had. And so they both apologize to one another, and they're like, I'm sorry. And they pay respect to one another. Like, I respect you, I admire you, I love you, I respect your family, I love your family, I love your work. I'm sorry, I overreacted. I take accountability for how I took that and how I behaved. In that moment, listeners, y'all don't know how many times I played that video over and over and over. I was just sitting in tears.
You're like, a man apologizing. Let me just keep playing it.
Yes, because again, can we think about where we would be in the world if men felt comfortable and like felt like it was okay and safe to say, I'm sorry, I fucked up, I made a mistake, not to get dark instead of taking a gun and shooting somebody? I think our world would be a much safer place if men were taught to apologize, we're taught to take accountability, we're taught to say I'm sorry, we're taught to say I love you to one another. So you have, and this moment is significant because you have Puerto Rican man, you have a Colombian man, and they're apologizing on a Mexican platform in front of a primarily Mexican audience. Latino masculinity has its own roots, its own, it's its own version of toxic, it has its own version of toxic masculinity. It was so powerful for me, that intersection of like also challenging Latino masculinity and Mexican machismo, and saying like, it's okay and we can do this publicly. Now, some people might be critical of that because in the performance, they did know that they had previously made up before going on stage together. I was obviously probably before J Balvin agreed to come to Mexico and perform. So they made up, they talked about whatever it was. And I think I saw like a tweet going on like, oh, well, why did they have to like reenact that on stage? That was performative. But I think the decision to do that tells us a lot about Bad Bunny's politics and his commitment to challenging and disrupting narratives of masculinity or traditional narratives of masculinity. I think it's a really powerful thing to show men doing that, to like live in the moment say, I love you, I'm sorry, I messed up.
We got to model the behavior for them. Well, the men have to model the behavior for the other men.
Exactly. Back to, yes, I guess we do need men in the movement, right? It just lands differently. I'm not here to say like that Bad Bunny wholeheartedly rejects masculinity and is charting like a brand new territory that is unseen. And this is sort of the contradiction of Bad Bunny, right? Is that, no, listen, like Bad Bunny is also adopting those hyper masculinist personas, talking about sex with multiple women and, you know, singing about his penis. Like, so he's buying into it. He's buying into sort of the masculine persona that we would associate with Latin trap, with reggaeton. But again, I think it's really powerful that they decided to do that on stage and to model this for others. And the fact that that happened in Mexico was just extra powerful to me, thinking about my own experiences of fathers and uncles and grandparents and, you know, Mexican men at large who I see struggle with saying I'm sorry and struggling with recognizing when they fucked up.
Yeah. I want to start transitioning us to the end, but before I ask my like titular question, do you have any Super Bowl predictions?
Do we already know who's playing?
Girl, I don't know who's playing. Do they know? They don't know yet.
No, I think after this Sunday. Okay.
No, okay. I want to be really clear. When I say, do you have Super Bowl predictions? I mean, like, do you think Bad Bunny will do anything specific? Will he bring out a certain game? I don't care about the game, girl. No, I don't know.
I was like, I don't know who's playing. Seeing Kendrick and sort of like the really smart ways that his performance was very critical of the United States, it just makes me really hopeful for Bad Bunny. I know that it is going to be coded, or my prediction is that the performance is definitely going to be coded. And I think that some people might miss some of the critiques that he's making or some of the messaging that he's making. I think that Bad Bunny is going to put on a show for us. It's going to put on a show for Puerto Ricans. It's going to put on a show for diasporic subjects. It's going to put on a show for people who feel rejected. It's going to put on a show for people who feel targeted by this country, by this administration. I just don't know how overt he's going to be about it. I hope he's like crystal clear, but also like I understand if, you know, if he can't be. And that was a beautiful thing about the Kendrick Lamar concert. It was so coded. Like I remember just consuming all of the Black cultural critics who were like giving me nuanced readings of what was happening. And I was like, oh, is that what that means? And so I'm also excited for the content that will come afterwards of like Latino cultural studies folks coming and helping explain like why this matters. So I think it's going to be powerful no matter what. It's going to be fun for sure.
I can't wait to see it.
Me too.
So we've made it to the end. We've made it to our question. But is it feminist? And I think it's possible that there could be people listening to this show who are critical of the fact that we've made the conscious choice to highlight a cisgender, presumably heterosexual man. But as listeners of last season should know, you should know, do your reading, people. I am trying to think of feminism as an expansive identity. It's an expansive movement that wants everyone to be free, everybody to be happy and whole. So if feminism's promise is feminism for everybody, what does feminism do? What can it do for men? And how does Bad Bunny tell us something important about feminism?
Yeah. So, it's important to not simply collapse feminism and women together. That's first and foremost where I want to start because of what I'm going to say next. Bad Bunny recently presented Ivy Queen with an award at the Billboard Awards, and he was talking about like how important Ivy Queen. She's a reggaetonera. How important she is to the genre, and he said something along the lines of and I can't imagine how challenging it has been for her to be in this industry. And he paused and he said, and I don't want to speak for her because again, I don't know what it's like to be a woman in this genre. And he's like, actually, I don't know what it's like to be a woman, period, but I know that women are important, that women matter, that women like make the world go round. And I mention that because some of his songs and the way that he carries himself, to me, definitely align with the project of feminism, with feminist world making. We're imagining a future where gender is not rigid, imagining a future that does not have gender violence, imagining a future that doesn't have trans violence and transphobia. My feminist world making also involves decolonial projects, really trying to escape the vestiges of colonialism in an economic, political, social, and everyday level. And Bad Bunny does all those things. So when I think about my feminist utopia, Bad Bunny's there. When I think of the feminist cookout, Bad Bunny is invited, okay? In my feminist utopia, we're all dancing to Yo Perreo Sola. We're all singing Andrea. And so, yeah, to me, Bad Bunny's work, his music, the way that he carries himself is compatible with feminism.
Thank you so much for making me feel so much hope and joy during this conversation. It's, as we have both talked about, a really tough time for a lot of people right now. And I think conversations like these about these topics in general are important, but having conversations of very explicit examples of where can you find hope and resistance right now, I think are really needed. So thank you for pointing us all in the right direction.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. And like I said, you made a dream come true. So I'm so excited to have been a part of this.